Good evening, and welcome to Soluble, America's Political Central. Today's date is January the 22nd in the year of our Lord, 2024. And then there were two. We have two people left to decide who is going to be the Republican nominee running for the office of President of the United States. And then there were two. The New Hampshire primaries will be held tomorrow, starting shortly after midnight with Dixville Notch, which is, known for being the first in the nation, as far as primary balloting beginnings are concerned. Now, we see that with these two candidates, one is hanging by a thread and one is a practical juggernaut to gain the nomination for Republican Party presidential candidate for the United States of America. We've had these candidates to answer the question in the past. Will they support the former president if he is the eventual nominee? Now, also, we want to make note here at Soluble that all of these contestants were asked to sign a pledge. We've all pledged allegiance to the flag, and that should be enough. We've all pledged allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. And so, with this happening in the Republican Party, we've never seen this. This is unprecedented in history that we know of here at Soluble, where all participating candidates have to sign a pledge to basically support the former president of the United States of America. And, so here we are. It's between the former president and Ambassador Haley going into tomorrow's primary in New Hampshire. They've been asked in the past, let me finish. They've been asked in the past if they would support the former president if he is the eventual nominee. And the answer has mostly been a dodge, a duck the question, don't come out with an indirect answer. And most say to the fact that, he won't be the eventual nominee. The American people are smart. They want something different. They're ready to move on. But yet and still, here we are. One day out from the first in the nation primary, and you have two candidates here, one hanging by a thread and one's a juggernaut. Now, the Republican candidates have stated that, the president is unfit in so many words. I mean, none of the former contestants for the candidacy or for the nomination, none of them would actually come out and say anything directly right about the president, although the truth may be controversial in MAGA circles. None of them would come out and say anything directly truthful about the damage that the president is doing to the country, about his fitness for office, his leadership capabilities. None of them would come out and directly say anything about it. Now, we don't know if that's because, they're all playing for a vice presidential pick, a VP pick. They're thinking about their future political aspirations, and they don't want to upset the MAGAites. And Democrats, we have to do it one more time, and it shouldn't be regrettably. It shouldn't be like with dread or fear or foreboding. We've did it before, and we can do it again. It's really a head scratcher, I think, to the vast majority of Democrats and common sense independents, and even never Trumper Republicans. It's a definite head scratcher as to how and why, this president or this former president is chosen again. after all the damage that he's done, to the republic, all the ways he's poked and prodded to try to find a way around the system of checks and balances that we have that would put himself above the law. But nevertheless, we're here. Democracy is threatened once again, and we have to send a message. We have to send a message. Now, we're going to push back on everything and all things that the Republicans are saying that are half truths, or that they're saying and being hypocritical as it relates to their own guy. I mean, we're circling the wagons around President Biden and Vice President Harris, and rightfully so. This is what's going on within the Democratic Party, and it should be up to us as a party, as Democratic voters, to decide, and only Democratic Party and Democratic voters to decide who will be our guy, who will be our dog in the fight for the right to say, what goes on in a democratically elected government. We don't, pretend or, make believe as to what we wish it would be. This is the hand that we're dealt, because our colleagues on the right refused to impeach the former president after January the 6th. Had they done that, we wouldn't be here. And so this is the extreme. This is the extreme we find ourselves in. This is what we're running against. Now, we have a Republican nominee in the former president, who, by all accounts, from the contestants who were running for the nomination, by all their accounts, the former president was bad for democracy. You have Ambassador Haley saying that chaos follows him, but they wouldn't impeach him. They wouldn't impeach him for a second time, which would have disqualified him. So, as Democratic voters, we have to understand that we're the last line of defense right now for democracy, because the Republican Party is every which way but loose and centered around the former president, who is not a law and order president. I mean, yes, he talks a good game that he's for law and order and so forth and so on. But how does this begin to work in America? This system that is of a new, this new abnormal under the former president, where he stands for law and order, and he expects for everyone to abide by the law, while he tries at every turn to skate around it. And then you have our colleagues on the right, whether they're running for office, whether they're at the state level, whether they're former office holders or what have you. None of them have the guts and the courage that a former Representative Liz Cheney would have or has had. None of them have the courage. And so the only way we're going to solve it right now, the state of being that it is, the only way that we can solve it once again is to get our people out to the polls. To get our people out to the polls. I mean, because here we have a party that, wants to have it both ways. They're saying one thing during the debates, during the primary process. And we get it. We get it here at Soluble. Historically, that's the way it's been. Where, the candidates, they go at it. They point out each other's flaws, weaknesses, why he or she would be bad for the country. And once a nominee is chosen, the party rallies around said nominee. But to actually know that this really isn't the best that the Republicans have to offer. But for the candidates to still go along and bow and eventually kiss the ring because of Republican voters who we put in the minority before, to my fellow Democrats and common sense independents. We've put them in the minority in 2020. And we have to do it again because there's no sense of direction here. There's no sense of direction from the former president. The former president is on the campaign trail, rehashing old talking points, looking to settle imaginary scores. And think about this is where we're at. We have, as I said, a former president who pushes the envelope in a way that no other former commander-in-chief ever has, playing fast and loose with classified materials, just for one. And, he flaunts it right in the face of the American people. But with the Republican voters, the former president can do no wrong, simply because the melting pot that American democracy is becoming a more level playing field for all people, not just some people, but for all people. And so this is this is a big party. This is a big problem, excuse me. This is a big problem on the right. Simply this. So we appeal once again, as always, mainly to that 90+ percentile of African American voters to sit back, and take a good, close, hard look at what's actually going on. Your vote has been attacked. Your vote was under attack in 2020 because you turned red states like Georgia purple. And it's a numbers game. It's a numbers game. Those of us that's been around and studied democracy long enough knows that the majority rules. And so it's a numbers game. The things that we're going to have to be looking out for leading up to the election. They already have, using AI to simulate President Biden's voice, to give out false information, to say things that, would have people scratching their heads as to why he's saying it. And it's not even the president. But these are the tactics and methods, if you will, of those on the right who are so desperate to win an election that, they know no low. So at this point in time, without any further ado, we're prepared right now here at Soluble to say that the Republican nominee will be the former president, Donald J. Trump. The Republican nominee will be the former president, Donald J. Trump. And so, nothing has changed. The former president came out to no debates. The former president has introduced no new ideals. If you look at, what he's running on this time again, it's the same old, same old. Make America great again. Now, we see what happened in 4 years. The former president was able to tweet his naysayers into intimidation. Those who didn't agree with him in his own administration, he was able to fire them, and so forth and so on. And so, when it came to people trying to guide the president and keep him on a course of presidential discretion, if you will, the way a president carries himself, the former president would have none of it. These people were either fired, they were ostracized, or they resigned in disgust. And so, what do we think that we're going to get this time around? Now, you hear, Ambassador Haley, she's asked about the Republican nominee, former President Trump. If she were to win, the election, would she pardon him? And she says yes. And her reasoning is that because it would be good for the country, because the country is divided. Now, as Democratic voters, here's what I want you to think about here. We have Republican acolytes, if you will, who are following the former president and doing his bidding, who want to, like Ambassador Haley, who wants to pardon the former president because it would bring the country back together. But at the same time, the former president is doing everything he can to divide the country. He's doing he's flaunting. He's flaunting, he's turning his nose up at the system of checks and balances that governs us and that guides this democracy. The former president cares, he could care less about unity, about bringing the country together. And so as Democratic voters, we have to see through the rhetoric. We have to look beyond the words. Because oftentimes our colleagues on the right are trying to have their cake and eat it too. And you've heard it from the former ambassador out of her own mouth. And we heard it from other Republican candidates as well, that, pardoning the president, the former president, or going soft on the former president, would be good for the country because it divides the country simply because we're a nation of laws. And when the former president starts to go out of bounds towards doing things that are against the law or breaking the law, then the system has to react. The system of checks and balances has to react, whether it's at the federal level, whether it's at the state level. That's the way it's always worked. This is the way it's always worked. But yet, here we are with our colleagues on the right who expects us as a country to bend to the former president's will, look the other way as he breaks the law, as he snubs his nose at the law, at the system of checks and balances that we have. Can care less. He's already name calling. He's back to, his same old tricks. This is an old dog that you can't teach new tricks. Name calling, as divisive as ever. Misleading statements that are divisive as ever. So to my fellow Democrats, the ball is in your court. We have 2/3 of power, and it's a numbers game. The Republicans are desperate not to, come together and let's work together as one governing body, looking for a compromise here and a compromise there, some give here and some take there. This is what Soluble is all about. You won't see us looking down at a sheet of paper or looking away as if we're reading off of something like cue cards or teleprompter or what have you. We're constantly ready to lock eyes directly on the camera. Unlike our politicians, and it could be of the Democratic stripe and or the Republican stripe. But nothing is scripted here because we feel as though, we're at a breaking point. We're at a critical juncture here. So we're trying to bring the truth as best we know it. We're trying to bring out the facts as best we know it. Now, the knock on our guy The knock on our commander-in-chief or the commander-in-chief of the United States of America is, that he's old. He's up in years. And look how the system of checks and balances work. Abracadabra, la-di-da, whoop-de-doo. We have a vice president. And as Democratic voters, this is what we're asking you, to take a look at here at Soluble. This is where the problem lies. It's not that our commander-in-chief is too old to do the job. He's fit for duty. He's fit to serve. He's already been cleared by a team of medical physicians. So he's definitely fit to serve. And the system of checks and balances that we operate under gives him a vice president. And so to our Democratic voters, therein lies the problem. Therein lies the problem with our Republican colleagues on the right. That Vice President Kamala Harris is just one heartbeat away from the Oval Office. Now, our position here at Soluble is that we could understand, our colleagues on the right being up in arms that the vice president is one heartbeat away from the presidency if she was unfit to serve, if she wasn't qualified. She's way more qualified than the nominee on the right. But you're not going to hear Republicans saying this because they disagree with policy. We get that. We get that. But never in the history of the country, up to this point, have we had a president or a former president to trample on and disregard the laws that govern the country in a way that the former president has. And so, as we stated, President Biden is our guy. The Biden-Harris ticket is the one that we rode to the point that we are thus far in American history, starting in January of 2021. This is our commander-in-chief, and the Biden-Harris ticket is the one that we voted for, and the one that we chose to be governed by for 4 years. So the worst thing that we can do is let our colleagues on the right, who we're not going to question their love of country, the level of patriotism that they have towards the country, we're not going to question that. But what we're simply asking our Democratic and common sense independent voters, what we're simply asking here at Soluble is to let's rally around our guy, no matter what the outside noise is saying. Because we know right now, from a presidential standpoint, based on what we've already seen, we've seen, right now we've seen Joseph R. Biden right close to 4 years and how he's, conducted himself while in office, how he's tried to keep the United States of America charted on a course of calm, peace, prosperity, strong economic development here at home, strong foreign policy that would deter foreign threats. We've seen him roll up his sleeves and has done his job up to, November of this year, which will be completion of a 4-year term. Now, by all indicators, turning from one calendar year to another, the economy is headed in the right direction. It's headed in the right direction. The border. The president is trying his best to, come up with the solutions that he sees fit that will go a long ways in beginning to solve the border crisis that we face on the southern border. Can he get any cooperation from Republicans? Are they willing to put their 2 cents in to say, you know, here are our proposals, or here's what we think should be done on the southern border? And the two sides try and meet in the middle. We think not. We think that whatever the president has to offer is going to be wholeheartedly, for the most part, rejected by Republican politicians because they don't want to see him succeed in office. And this is the sad state that, you know, our politics have come to today. Nothing to say that the president is doing good, but we can do better, which is the way it once was. The Republican Party and Republican politicians are governing right now, leading up to the election of 2024, with closed arms and clenched fists. So they're not trying to cooperate. They're hoping to wait it out. They're hoping that, you know, they can stir up enough chaos and controversy that will cause you to become frustrated or aggravated with the job that the current commander-in-chief is doing, and thereby seize upon an opportunity to win an election simply by muddying up the president's reputation and throwing everything that he's trying to do that's good for the country, you know, throwing it in a meat grinder, if you will. Just doing away with it, just totally disregarding it. And, you know, this is what election year politics looks like in America, sadly, now today. A 90-something plus percentile of African-American voters. Now, the pushback has been, and the debate has been that, you know, what are we getting from the Democratic Party? Our answer at Soluble is simply this, and it's how democracy works. You know, you're getting from the Democratic Party what you give. And that has to be more than a vote. Here in 2024, that has to be more than a vote. You have to give more than a vote. You know, you have to give time and attention to the issues, to the policies. And then you have to get on the phone with your representatives. When they come back into their home districts, you have to get involved in order to get out of the Democratic Party what you feel like you need and or want as a community, as a neighborhood, as a certain ethnic group in America. It's what you give. Voting Democrat only. Voting only for a Democrat. Election day comes around and the Democrat wins. That's not a magic wand. That's not the way it works. Once our Democratic politicians have won the election, that's just the beginning. That's when the work starts. And for you, the American voter, that 90-something plus percentile African American, that's when your work starts also. To just stay engaged. Excuse me. To stay involved. To become a lobbyist, if you will. This is what they're doing on a regular basis. The lobbyists that are up in Washington, D.C. So there's a whole host of other things that you can do to get out of said party, the thing that you feel makes America a better place for you to live, work, and play. And it's just that simple. It's not just voting and having a candidate win office and then you feel like all your problems are solved. No, the election was held, and now let the work begin. And it's no time to rest on your laurels to that 90-something plus percentile of African-American voters. When the election is held and the people that you have come out in great numbers to elect have won. There's no time to rest on your laurels now. Yes, maybe there could be 24 hours of hand clapping and champagne sipping and congratulatory phone calls and things of that nature. But after that grace period, if you will, of celebratory phone calls, congratulations, attaboys, or whatever, then it's time for the real work to begin. And this is how American democracy works. We're going to explore, the other option, which is only fair, because, there has to be a choice that a course that we charter as African American voters, and try to figure out, what works best for us in whichever party. Now, on the right, what do you see? As we've stated on our last podcast, Iowa just, they were the first in the nation to hold the caucus, to start the process of, excuse me, of beginning to elect a Republican nominee for president of the United States of America. There are all kinds of groups in Iowa that hold rallies, that hold breakfasts or luncheons or whatever, where Republican candidates are coming to speak all across the great state of Iowa. The Iowa Minority Forum is announced, a date, a time, and a place, and your Republican politicians are no-shows. They're no-shows. So is Iowa just an outlier? Is Iowa just an isolated incident? Or is this the sentiment of the Republican Party from state to state to state to state all across this great nation? Our position here at Soluble is that, any African Americans that are dealing with the Republican Party are just tokens. And we just have to come out straight and say it like we feel it. We don't want the truth to be controversial. But if we're living in a time where, the truth is going to be controversial, then controversy will reign. Controversy will be the order of the day. But this says a lot about, the new abnormal that we find ourselves in as American voters, where the truth is controversial and alternative facts are more acceptable. And so the question remains, can we vote ourselves out of it? Can we vote ourselves away from this? You have a Republican nominee who has no respect for government, but at the same time, he wants to be the head of government. Help us on the left, my fellow Democrats. Help us to understand this. To my colleagues on the right, help us to understand how. You have a former president that you're championing once again to be the most powerful man in the world, but he has no respect for the government that he wants to run. And no one in the party seems to have the guts and or the courage to stand up now, other than Governor Christie. And who knows? It may be a matter of time before he caves. The governor here in Florida, he's just bowed out. He just suspended his campaign. And no less than 24 hours after suspending his campaign, he's thrown all of his pledges and loyalty and support and endorsements behind the former president, Donald J. Trump. we've stated that, both sides have good ideas on what they think is best for the country. And we're gonna break those down leading into November, issue by issue, to let to give it our perspective here at Soluble, so that it may or may not help you better decide. Some of us are already in our respective corners. Now, to that 90-something plus percentile, our goal here is Soluble, and our wish is that, we don't lose you. We don't lose you. And we want, we want you to think about if we are to lose you, then what are we losing you to? What are you going to? To this African American 90-something plus percentile that's voting in Democratic circles. You have seats at the table. You have voices in those seats. So what do you get when you cross over? What do we get as a country? And what do you have to complain about if you decide to sit this one out? The former president is just a wash, rinse, and repeat. There's nothing new to see here. And the former president doesn't have a clue. We're dealing with blatant hypocrisy, among other things. Because as I've stated earlier in this podcast, the knock on our guy, who we are encouraging to go dark Brandon and stay in that mode until November, excuse me. But the knock on our guy, largely coming from the right, is that he's too old. You hear the former president on the campaign trail. He's talking about January 6th and what he tried to offer Ambassador Haley on that particular day, as far as National Guard troops and how Ambassador Haley handled it. Did she accept that offer for 10,000 troops, or did she reject it? And Ambassador Haley had nothing to do with what went on in that particular situation. What is the former president talking about? But in Republican circles, all you will hear with something like this, which looks like, a lapse in judgment, a lapse in memory. It looks like, old age is showing on the brain, on the former president's ability to remember what happened and exactly how it happened. And it wasn't even 4 years ago. But they're all on our guy. They're all in on our guy, that he's too old, that he's incapable. Blatant hypocrisy. Blatant hypocrisy. And these, are the politicians that we, as a 90-something plus percentile of African American voters, would consider defecting to. We would consider going to this, where we don't know what is the truth from what is false, what is up and what is down. We don't know. And we won't know. Because as soon as the former president makes a mistake, slurs his words, or misspeaks, or he speaks in a way where we wonder what in the hell is he talking about, our Republican colleagues are rushing in to circle the wagons to defend him. And it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. Because they're trying to defend the indefensible. If they were to tell it like it is, our position here at Soluble would be to give them the benefit of the doubt. If they see the former president making verbal miscues, or speaking half-truths, or speaking, on things where it seems as if his memory is fuzzy. Just tell it like it is. Because it is what it actually is. So they'll knock, President Biden. They'll knock him. They'll call him out. They'll mock him. They'll do anything to scandalize his name when they see these type of things happen. But when the same thing is happening with their guy, so to speak, then it's nothing. There's nothing to defend the indefensible, but yet and still they manage to do it somehow. And so this is the Republican nominee. Rinse, wash, and repeat. And so as Democrats, we have to understand, if we had a sense of urgency to vote him out in 2020, and he's running again, and nothing has changed. This is nothing new and improved. By the former president's own account, he'll be a dictator just only on day one. Just only on day one. So nothing has changed. We're right back where we started in 2020. We voted him out. We thought that he would go away quietly, ride off into the sunset, taking his 4 years and, letting it be what it was. But here we are again after, trying to steal a legitimate election. After, seriously undermining our election system. After openly calling for rigging votes or finding votes for him, here we are again. Here we are again. A former president who, for the first time in American history, where we didn't have a peaceful transfer of power, and so you can become more determined, just as the Republican Party is. Just as they're more determined to put the former president back in the Oval Office again. Knowing the kind of train wreck of a presidency he had before as it relates to keeping democracy strong and safe around the world. They champion him again. And so we have to be just as dogged and determined as our colleagues on the right. Because nothing has changed. He's the same pathological liar, coming out with name calling. Now, it's no longer Sleepy Joe, it's Crooked Joe Biden. And, we'll get in this cycle of monkey see, monkey do. I see an impeachment just like you when there's nothing there. So why don't our colleagues on the right begin to govern, begin to shape policy that works for all of Americans and America itself? They have nothing but you to try and fool. Now, former Governor Haley, former Ambassador Haley, she's slowly but surely, she's spilling the tea. She told us last year at the beginning of the debates, how our colleagues on the right call out Democrats as tax and spend liberals and big spenders, and they have more earmarks, more money set aside for pork barrel spending than Democrats. So she's slowly but surely letting the cat out of the bag. But as Democrats, are we paying attention? She's revealed to the American people on the Sunday circuits that, she had to pull the former president aside at the United Nations for his desire to have a bromance with foreign dictators. Not foreign leaders who are also champions of democracy, which is what America stands for, but a bromance with foreign dictators. But yet and still, for our Republican colleagues on the right who have, no backbone to stand up to the former president and defend democracy. It's all par for the course. It's all okay. But as Democrats, we have to see the danger that is actually lurking there. We've seen the former president's, ability to lead. We've seen the former president's weakness at a time when the coronavirus hit. And it was not some person that could be tweeted into silence. That he can intimidate with tweets and cause them to go away. Here was COVID-19. A real true test. Because as I said, it was the first time in the former president's presidency that he couldn't tweet something into subjugation or to silence. And we see what happened. We see what happened when he was exposed with a national disaster in the form of the coronavirus. One of the things he did was blame his predecessor and say that they left the shelves empty. And so, that's why their hands were tied and there was nothing that they could do. Here you are, the president of the most powerful country in the world. And the first thing you can do in time of a disaster is to point fingers at your predecessor, who by all accounts from the former president was incapable from the jump. He wasn't a good president from the beginning. So why would you feel like you shouldn't have to rely on him when you find the shelves empty and bare? You're the commander-in-chief now. The buck stops with you. And the former president has several years in office, before the coronavirus struck in America. He had several years in office to prepare, to be proactive when it comes to, disease outbreaks. And for all we know, as patriotic, country-loving Democrats, China could have actually pulled one over on the former president. Because we have to realize and understand now that when the coronavirus hit, the former president's administration was in tatters. There were acting administrators. There were some positions that weren't filled, that were left vacant, or that were vacant at the time when we started to ease into this pandemic. And so, it begs the question, or questions, about this Republican nominee. Has he learned from his mistakes? Has he gotten any smarter? Has he shown any more of a willingness to actually bring the country together and govern the United States of America? We have from now up until November to decide, to take a long look at, both men who are vying, for office. For the incumbent, which is President Joseph R. Biden, to get another 4 years, or the former president, Donald J. Trump, to come in and rain terror and uncertainty down on the American public once again. Now, there are those who want to say that, as before in 2016, that the former president he's great for the economy. He's a businessman. He knows economics. Why so many bankruptcies? Why were banks or lending institutions starting to be skeptical or reserved when it comes to, loaning the former president money for his businesses? Why is he in court right now in the state of New York, about to lose his ability to do business there? Now, if you listen to our colleagues on the right, our fellow citizens and voters on the right, it's because the left is in charge and they don't like the former president, and so therefore they're going after him. He's squeaky clean. He's innocent. Well, why hasn't he produced the evidence? He hasn't produced evidence to the contrary when it comes to the 2020 election being stolen. He hasn't produced evidence to the contrary to show that he wasn't cooking the books at the Trump organization. He hasn't shown any evidence to the contrary that Weisselberg or Cohen are lying about the things that they've sworn under oath. He's shown nothing to the contrary. When it comes to E. Jean Carroll, when it comes to Miss Carroll, he hasn't shown anything to the contrary as far as evidence. He has no evidence to show in none of these cases as it relates to his innocency. Nothing. Zilch. And so, we're under attack once again as a country. Now, of course, our colleagues on the right won't see it like that. And we understand that. This is their guy. So we have to put the facts out there. We have to, get involved and get just as vocal for our guy. You don't see our colleagues on the right saying anything about criticizing or expressing any skepticism or doubt about the way that the Justice Department is going after the distinguished senator from New Jersey, Senator Menendez, in this investigation of bribery, collusion, or what have you. Favoritism towards, foreign governments or foreign entities. You don't see our colleagues on the right saying anything about, whether it's going good, whether it's going bad, whether the investigation towards, Senator Menendez is fair or not. And they don't have an argument there. And so what we have to realize as Democratic voters is it's happening. It's happening. It's happening right before your eyes. And these are signs. These are signals to you. Before Senator Menendez, we heard our Republican colleagues with great fervor and enthusiasm and zeal to say that it's a two-tier system. It's rigged against the former president. And lo and behold, there was Senator Menendez. We didn't ask for it as Democrats. We didn't wish for it. We didn't want it. But it happened. And so we have to deal with it for what it is. If the evidence is there that implicates the senator's guilt, then he has to be judged by a group of his peers. But it's there. It's there as a sign, as something for you to really take notice of, to say, okay, it's a two-tier system. Okay, well, what about Senator Menendez? What will the Republicans come up with if, they're asked the question as it relates to it being a two-tier system? What about Senator Menendez? They'll start to spin. They'll start to dance. They'll start to put out alternative facts. A great possibility. So Everything that they're saying or throwing at our guy is happening in their own party circles. And it would be foolish of us as Democrats not to take notice as to how it's being handled. Our guy's old. You know, his memory is failing him. He's becoming less and less sharper every day. And what do you see? You see the former president on the campaign trail, up at the podium, talking about Ambassador Haley and the things that she would and would not accept on that fateful day, January the 6th. And everybody who is somebody who knows what's going on, who's aware of how this system works, and what transpired on that fateful day, knows that Ambassador Haley had nothing to do with security measures. She had no power to accept or deny requests from the former president as it relates to National Guard troops. So this is the Republican nominee to my fellow Democrats. And as I said, and we will point it out more and more leading up to November. But the hypocrisy is just so up in your face. And it begs the question, you know, are we going to be fooled? Are we going to be bamboozled when it comes to our guy? Because everything negative that they're pushing towards our president, President Biden, the president of the United States of America, the same thing is happening in Republican circles. And you're seeing zilch being done about it. Nothing. Nothing. And so, breaking it down issue by issue, you know, once the nomination has been made official, you know, we'll break it down issue by issue. When it comes to crime, I think we've touched on foreign policy, but we'll revisit it again. When it comes to job creation, we've touched on it last year, but we'll revisit it again. Women's rights are on the ballot. Climate change is on the ballot. Energy policy is on the ballot. The future of education in this country is on the ballot. There are so many things. And as Democrats, you know, it's not time to, the last thing that we want to do, especially that 90-something plus percentile of African-American voters, the last thing we want you to do is to throw your hands up in disgust with the system. Because that's what our Republican colleagues are counting on. They hope to wear you down and wear you out with false accusations about our guy or derogatory comments being made about our guy. This is the United States of America. And we have a president in the Oval Office who is leading us forward as a country. No matter what your political background, no matter what race, creed, or color, he's leading us all forward as a United States of America. And you have the Republican nominee who's yet to be declared the winner. But we're prepared tonight here at Soluble, even before the first primary votes are cast in New Hampshire. We're prepared to say that Donald J. Trump is the guy. He is the guy. And sadly, nothing has changed. You know, he's went after Ambassador Haley about her native Indian name. What is the problem? She's an American citizen, no matter what the name. And here you have, you know, Ambassador Haley saying that, you know, America is not a racist country. But yet and still she can't use that Indian name. What's the problem? This is her name from birth. You know, we saw what Barack Obama did. We saw what he did. He could have went with an English translation and went from Barack to Barry. But he went with Barack. But here it is. Once again, the blatant hypocrisy, the misleading statements, the lies. The Republican Party candidates trying to have their cake and eat it too. It's not a racist country. It never has been a racist country. But in the Republican Party, she's Nikki Haley and not Nimrata. But the former president sees fit to, use that as a racist dog whistle in a party that was formed by a revolt from the Dixiecrats way back in those days for racist reasons. So, as Democratic voters, we have to ask ourselves, is what we see actually what we get? And if not, we know that we have a decision to make in November and getting ready to rock the vote. In closing, the Republican nominee is unfit. He's unqualified. And he doesn't have the leadership qualities to take the country forward as a whole into the next 4 years of a sound and strong democracy. So our mission here is to point out all the facts, the pros and cons of each candidate, even our own. We're going to hit President Biden just as hard, if not harder, simply because we love the country and we want to see him do a good job. But we're going to separate fact from fiction as we go. The blatant hypocrisy, the misleading statements, the half-truths, the whole 9 yards. And from issue to issue, as it affects us as